Hello and welcome to the stream. I hope you can hear me well, and I want to say hello and welcome for this kind of tutorial about how to get started with generative AI and ComfyUI in particular. So to start things off, I first want to say who is this for, or answer the question. So this is something I want to pay particular attention to because I want you to be able to start and follow along with literally every single step that we are doing here. So theoretically, if you have the hardware that we will talk about in just a moment, and if you follow every step that we are doing here, you should theoretically be able to do every single thing we are doing here as well and get started with generative AI in hopefully a very easy and self-explanatory way. So let's first talk about what you need. So in order to follow along, you need either a Windows or Linux device or a Mac device. And we will talk a little bit about Mac devices in just a moment. So we will start with Windows and Linux devices. So if you have a laptop or a PC that is running Windows or Linux, you need a GPU with at least 4+ gigabytes of VRAM. You will also need a device with at least 12 gigabytes plus of RAM and 20 gigabytes of storage. So the storage thing you will probably need more in the long run. The GPU part of it, you definitely need 4 gigabytes or more VRAM. The more VRAM you have, the better things run, generally speaking. The RAM is quite interesting. So for this, I will give just a very little bit of background about myself if you have never listened to me or watched any of my videos. I'm teaching, or I'm a practicing artist, and I'm teaching AI and AI related things at a university in Germany. So I have quite a few students who might be joining here, so welcome to you. But to everyone else, I have a few people or a few, let's say, case studies in terms of what kind of devices are working and what kind of devices are not working. So, for example, one student was getting started with a device. I think she had 8 gigabytes of VRAM and just 4 gigabytes of RAM, and somehow things still worked. It's not great, you know, like if you can already tell that your laptop or PC is very old, things will probably be more difficult, but generally speaking, these should be like the parameters you should follow. Generally speaking as well, with Windows it should be relatively easier to get something working than with Mac devices because there it's much more particular. So anyway, even if you're not meeting these requirements, you can at least try to follow along. Just don't have too high hopes, I guess. So for the people having macOS devices, here it's much more clear in a sense, right? So you need an Apple Silicon chip. Those are the ones called M something. So M1, M2, M3. I'm not sure if there's an M4 device yet, but depending on when you are watching this, some of these Apple Silicon devices. So if you still are running macOS with an Intel chip, there are ways around it, but with the software that we are using today, you will need an Apple Silicon device. Otherwise, the software will just tell you you don't meet the requirements. So that's that. And here as well, you need 12 gigabytes of RAM or 12 or more gigabytes of RAM, and again, 20 gigabytes of storage. Here, just for you to understand a little bit of background, since the Apple Silicon devices kind of combine the RAM and VRAM things, to keep it very simple, the more RAM you have, the better. So again, I can talk a little bit about how things are at work in this case. So we do have like a, I guess, first generation Apple Silicon M1 Mac Studio. No, Mac Mini, right? Not Mac Studio, Mac Mini. And that one has an M1 chip with 8 gigabytes of RAM, if I'm not mistaken. And it is possible, or it can run things, but it's not fast by any stretch of the imagination. So what we will talk about next, the plan for the stream. And while I'm doing this, I'm just quickly checking because I think we can optimize the look here a little bit. So let me quickly scale the screen. So now it should be more centered and larger. Right, so the plan for this stream, what are we doing here? So first and foremost, we will install Stability Matrix. Stability Matrix is something like a hub. You can imagine it a little bit like, for example, Steam, you might be familiar with. So Steam is basically a platform, an application, or a service where you can buy games and then install them and have them all in like one place, basically. And Stability Matrix does something kind of similar with AI tools. So instead of having to install every AI tool and instead of having to download every model manually, you can use Stability Matrix, which will then allow you to have everything kind of centralized, which makes things a bit easier. So we will look at Stability Matrix. We will then learn how to use it, how to navigate the user interface and kind of get it to work. And then we will install ComfyUI. So we will talk a little bit more about this later. If you have heard of ComfyUI and your first or your initial thought is, oh no, I'm scared of ComfyUI because it has all those nodes and everything, don't be worried. I used to, when I was teaching AI at university, I used to kind of avoid ComfyUI usually, but that tends to basically just delay things because ComfyUI is by far the most powerful and also kind of the most reliable generative AI tool or user interface that we have at the moment. So I think it makes more sense to just start with ComfyUI from the beginning, even if it's slightly more complicated to get started, but this is what this stream's for. If you follow along, I hope you can kind of get everything and make it work for yourself. I'm relatively confident we can get that today. So next we will learn how to use it, obviously, and then we will generate the image from the thumbnail. So if this kind of got you excited, you will be able to make exactly that, or that exact image in ComfyUI in hopefully not too long from now. Hopefully we will get there quickly. So that's kind of that. With that, we can already start installing ComfyUI, and here you can Stability Matrix in the first step, and here you can already see we have these kind of slides that you've seen already perhaps, and there are links in there. So the first thing I should do, and I want to do for you, is to give you the link to that in the chat. So I will give you a few links. We will start with the slides. That is this link in the chat. There's another fun thing. Let's see if that works. Maybe it doesn't work yet. I'll have to check. I think it does work. So let's try that. Or maybe let's not try that. Okay, I was about to do some text-to-speech things, but I can highlight it like this already, right? So you can basically see the chat messages here. And if you have something and we want to talk about it, I can highlight your chat messages and we will have text-to-speech. This one doesn't make a lot of sense with text-to-speech because it's just a link. So that's that. But anyway, we can highlight messages. So please feel free to write in the chat so we can talk about things on the go. Another few things I want to very quickly highlight before we start to download things and get started with everything, now that I'm at it with posting links. For one, you can follow me on Instagram. So I will give you the link to my Instagram. There you can stay up to date with all the stuff I'm doing. And also I will post the link for another Instagram profile. That is the one where we created this artist collective where we are doing all these AI kind of things, which is called Heibara Ai, and we also have an Instagram account there, so you can check that and kind of see all the other hopefully nice images that we created in that collective with AI, basically the same way that we are doing things now. So that was Instagram, and then of course this overlay is getting old, 150 subscribers. We have a bit more by now, but anyway, please subscribe to see future tutorials and stuff like that. So anyway, let's start by continuing here. Oh, right, I'm going to show you also the Instagram thing. So this is my account, the things that you can expect there, and here you can see the Heibara Ai posts. So this is the kind of stuff you can expect from those two Instagram accounts. So first things first, we want to install Stability Matrix. So you can either just do a web search for Stability Matrix, or you can click on this link. So in this case, I'm making it easy for myself, but we can also just go here and check for Stability Matrix, if I'm not mistyping that. And in whatever search engine you're in, you will find this second link, either second or first, which is a website by Lycos AI. Lycos is a team that is doing a few things. They did some major fine-tuning for Stable Diffusion models, and they also develop this kind of app, Stability Matrix, which we can use to do all the other things with. So here, usually this should already show you the exact operating system that you have to download things for. So in my case, it already detects that I'm on Windows, but if for some reason it doesn't detect the right one, you can also select here for Windows, for macOS, or for Linux. So I will click on that and it will open here the download preview, and I can just save it here. Right. So now it's downloading, and I have prepared things already, but we would still go through all the steps just to make sure that everyone can follow along. But once we get to download things, I will kind of skip ahead a little bit just to save some time. So now we have it inside of the folder where we downloaded it. So there's already some other stuff, but this is the thing we just downloaded. So a few things for this already when you start downloading this. A quick tip, and you can already see it here, SanDisk 1000, that's like my external drive. You can run all these AI tools from an external hard drive, or not hard drive, but solid state drive, SSD. You just have to make sure that your SSD is fast enough. So in this case, I'm using a SanDisk Extreme portable 1 terabyte SSD. So on this one it works fine. If I would put this on like a USB stick, it wouldn't work because it cannot read and write things fast enough from there, I believe. So just like if you're following along right now, check maybe you have a leftover SSD, external SSD that you want to use, and just download it onto there and do everything from there, because again, we will get quite a lot of files and stuff that are quite large, so you maybe don't want to trash your desktop. So in this case, I have it downloaded, and I can just click extract, and I'm going to extract it here. If you are on macOS, things are mostly self-explanatory as well. There's not much that can go wrong, to put it in simple terms. If you know how to install an app on macOS, you know how to do this kind of thing, but right now I can only show it to you on Windows. So now we have it extracted, and we have the executable file here. So what we want to do with this is kind of obvious. We want to double click it to start it. Now I'm pretty sure we will get a warning, this one here. So this is a warning I have to make in general. So this is a software that is, as it says here, unrecognized by Microsoft Defender. So it doesn't even say it is a virus, it just says it doesn't know what this is because the code is not signed. You don't really have to understand what that means, but anyway, it doesn't even say it's a virus, it just says it's unrecognized. If you want to be on the very safe side, you can kind of stop here and try to install ComfyUI manually and kind of continue later on when we start with ComfyUI. I still believe Stability Matrix has some major advantages, so I will still show you how to use this, but do this at your own risk, and generally don't just download things from the internet that you have no reason to believe are safe. So just to have said that, in this case we can click on more info, and I'm going to say run anyway because I've been using this for quite a long time and haven't had any issues yet. So here the first thing that we want to do once the program starts, once we allow it to run, is that we want to go into the portable mode. The portable mode basically means that you're not installing anything. What does that mean? So if we would go out of the portable mode, if we don't use the portable mode, it will put stuff into our system directory basically, which is fine. There's nothing categorically bad or wrong with that, but to do it in the portable mode is quite nice because you have everything inside of one folder. So for example, if you want to change to a different PC later on, you can just basically take that folder and transfer it to your new PC and run Stability Matrix from there. Also, it keeps things a bit more tidy and you kind of know better where things are. So this is what I always recommend you to do. So I'm going to say portable mode, I'm going to click continue. Then it asks me to share analytics. There is no reason to send them information, I believe. I mean, it would be nice for them, but I don't want to be the person who sends them the analytics, so I'm just going to say don't share analytics. You can though, that shouldn't really break anything. And now we see the different WebUIs. So this is the first big decision we have to take. So here we can already see a pop-up that is not really important, so I'm just going to click on close. And now we see a long list of different tools. So to give you a little bit of background, they are all, in this case at least, they are all mostly using the same thing going on in the background. So they all use basically Python, which is a very common programming language, to execute some kind of rules to generate those images. Now, each of them is a different web UI, so it's a different web user interface. So they do the same thing to the most degree in the background, but there are still different ways to interact with the kind of code that is executed, right? So all of those have different kind of advantages and disadvantages, and if you're on macOS, you might see a few different ones than we will see here on Windows, but generally I can give you at least a very brief overview of the ones that I have used in the past and that I can kind of recommend. So I guess the most easy one is called Focus. So Focus is trying to strip the whole web user interface down to the very core concepts of it. So this one you can just install and basically just put a prompt in and click generate, and you get decent kind of images out of it. So it's kind of more like Midjourney, as it says here as well, like it's the kind of difficulty degree you have in Midjourney. So this one's usually one I recommend for people to just get started if they don't want to have a lot of options, but just want to try generating some stuff. The issue with that is that Focus is not working very well on macOS. So usually if I'm recommending things, I don't recommend this first because it kind of separates the Windows from the macOS users. The next, let's say, the next easy thing, or the next most easy thing or most common thing, is the Stable Diffusion web UI. So the title can be a bit misleading because they are all these things that we see here are Stable Diffusion web UIs in one way or the other. They all use Stable Diffusion and give you a web user interface. But this one by Automatic 1111 used to be the flag bearer for Stable Diffusion, used to be the kind of standard option. It gives you most of the settings that you need, or access to most of the settings that you need, and it can also be, I guess, made more capable with extensions, right? So you can put extra extensions in to extend the kind of usability of the Stable Diffusion web UI. And I would still recommend this in many different ways, and in some ways it might even be better than ComfyUI. So particularly for in-painting, so if you want to change just a selected area of an image, the Stable Diffusion web UI is much, I don't want to say better, but it's much easier to do in-painting with the Stable Diffusion web UI, for example. So I usually tend to have the Stable Diffusion web UI and ComfyUI both installed on my system and kind of go back and forth for whatever is the thing I need the most at the moment and which web UI is better at performing at. So the last option, or I mean there are many more, but the one that we will look at is ComfyUI. You can already see in this tiny preview image here that ComfyUI is this kind of node-based system, which might look more intimidating at first, but what I especially figured now working with students is that the Stable Diffusion web UI kind of became a bit more unstable. It's more difficult to install on some systems. It throws more errors. It just kind of seems a bit more, I guess, wacky compared to how it used to be. And ComfyUI is very actively maintained by the ComfyUI org. So they are very, very, they're working on ComfyUI very well and bringing out a lot of useful updates. So even if this looks more difficult at first, I would recommend you to get started with this. And I will kind of walk you through how to get started with ComfyUI. So for today, you will just select ComfyUI, and this gets us to the second most important thing. So now we have the user interface that we want to use. So we have the kind of like visual interface that we can interact with in order to generate things. But this is something different than the model, right? So we basically have three most important things. Number one is just the code, like the Python code, like the, I guess, Stable Diffusion algorithm that's running in the background, that's generating the images. So that's kind of the most basic thing and the thing we always need. Then I guess the second most important thing is the models, but we will talk about that now, or like after I mention the other thing. And the web interface is just how to interact with it, right? So we have the code in the background, we have our interaction in the user interface, and now we have our model. The model basically, and I'm simplifying a lot of things here, like don't quote me on that, but I'm trying to make it as easy as possible to understand, so some of these things might be a bit short-sighted, but anyway, I hope you can understand it better like this. The model basically knows all the things that the AI produces, right? So the model knows what a tree looks like, what a lake looks like, what a person looks like, all those things. The model is trained to basically understand image content and to generate it. Yeah, I'm not going to put too many complicated terms in it, like neural network and all those kind of things you can kind of ignore. To summarize again, you have the code in the background, you have the user interface, and you have the model that knows the kind of things. So you can determine what kind of things you want or want to be able to generate by picking the model that you're choosing. So in terms of models, there are new kinds and types of models coming out more and more frequently these days. So the base thing that we used to work with in the very beginning of generative AI, or like this kind of more improved generative AI, was Stable Diffusion. And Stable Diffusion has a base model which can generate things. They usually don't look great. So the internet, as it happens, decided, okay, we're going to take that model, we're going to take this base Stable Diffusion model and try to improve it, like kind of fine-tune the model in different ways. From this, all these kind of community-led models came from. So now we have Stable Diffusion and we have fine-tuned models, but there are different Stable Diffusion models, right? So we have just the base model, we have fine-tuning, and we have different types of Stable Diffusion models. So keep that in mind. We have Stable Diffusion 1.5 models and Stable Diffusion XL models, to speak in a simplified way. We also have Stable Diffusion 3 and 3.5 and that kind of stuff, but the most standard ones are Stable Diffusion 1.5 and Stable Diffusion XL. How are they different? Stable Diffusion 1.5 was trained on images with a resolution of 512 by 512 pixels, so it can only reliably generate images with the same resolution. So with Stable Diffusion 1.5, you are basically limited to 512 by 512 pixel resolution images. Stable Diffusion XL is basically the next generation of Stable Diffusion models, and that one was trained on 1024 by 1024 pixel images, right? So twice the resolution. So theoretically, you can generate twice as sharp or clear images, theoretically speaking. Now you might think, okay, I'm just going to go with Stable Diffusion XL because that's the one that looks better, right? Yes, theoretically, yes. But if you have not the greatest hardware, I would very much encourage you to start with Stable Diffusion 1.5 and kind of test the waters with that, right? So Stable Diffusion 1.5 will be much faster and will work on much lower hardware, while Stable Diffusion XL will only work on slightly better PCs but will produce better images in a bit slower, right? So for the moment, and if you want to follow along, I would recommend you to first download a Stable Diffusion 1.5 model. So I'm just going to click on that. This one is called DreamShaper. It's one of the large, very common and popular models, and it's by Lycos, the same people who made Stability Matrix, and I would usually recommend you to just try DreamShaper. It's a very all-around fine model, right? So now you can click on download, and I have been talking so much that ComfyUI already installed in the background, right? So we clicked on like ComfyUI as our WebUI and it already installed. So this is the thing happening in the background. It's executing all those kind of things and installing things, right? So in this case, we already downloaded that. And now I clicked it away, but here you will find all the other things downloading. So in this case, this is already finished successfully. And here we have DreamShaper that's downloading right now. While this is downloading, first I'm gonna have a sip of water, and then I'm gonna walk you through the Stability Matrix interface and how everything works here. So let me close that in the background, not to have so much things going on. I'll have a sip of water and then we talk about Stability Matrix and how to use it basically. So when we get started here, I usually would recommend you to first click this kind of hamburger menu icon, right? So it already says open navigation, and this just extends this kind of view. So now you can actually read what's going on and don't have to rely just on the icons. So the first thing that always opens when you run Stability Matrix is this packages tab or menu. And here we already see ComfyUI was installed. So ComfyUI is one of the packages we can install. Again, now one of the great advantages of Stability Matrix is that we can just click here on Add Packages. Now, for example, I could say, okay, I also want to use the Stable Diffusion WebUI. So I just click on that, and now I can click Install. And this way I can have all these different packages or WebUIs in the background and go back and forth between the ones that I need for specific kind of things, right? So for today we will just use ComfyUI, but perhaps in future tutorials or for yourself, if you want to check something else, you can just add it there. So that's very nice. The next one I usually just tell people to ignore. So this is the Inference tab. Here you can basically generate images inside of Stability Matrix. That's totally fine, you can do that, and I guess it is even easier because you don't have to open anything, but we will do the whole thing later in ComfyUI. So there's no real reason why we would do it here and not in ComfyUI straight away. Then we have the checkpoint manager. In this case, my model is still downloading, but here we will see all the models that we have downloaded in the past. So again, models are the ones that kind of understand content of images. So some models might be better at producing some kind of images, for example. Here you can also see there are a lot of other models that you can install as well. They all have like different kind of, use cases. Oh, and now we can already see this is finally downloaded now. So we will find this here in the list under Stable Diffusion. So all these base models, or not the Stable Diffusion base model, not the pruned model, but all the kind of checkpoint models, they are usually also called. All the models that you can generate images with will, for the most part, be saved in this folder or section. Now we have the model browser, and I will let that load for a moment and drink a little bit more. But here we can later install or download extra models. But again, give me a short break. So here we can already see this one is the installed one. And I kind of want to walk you through the main things that you can or should look out for here. So these kind of, these tags in the top are basically the most important thing to check for while you are going through things. So there are a lot of different types of models, as I said before, but even more models than what I mentioned before. So here we can see these are all 1.5 models, so that's good to know. Here we can already see this is a 1.5 hypermodel. So hypermodels basically have one reason or advantage. They can generate images in fewer steps. We will later talk a bit more about steps. But generally speaking, the fewer steps you take, usually the more noisy the image is, but also the shorter time it takes to generate the image. So in this case, for example, if you use a regular model like a Dream Shaper, I would, for example, use 20 steps to generate an image. And with the hypermodel, I might be able to just generate the image in 4 or 5 steps. So it's just a fourth of the time it takes to render. This always is kind of a compromise, because I personally think these Hyper or Lightning or LCM models usually produce worse quality outcomes or outputs. But for example, there are also, and we can see if we find something here, here we see the first XL 1.0 model, but let me see if I can find another example. Here's a good one, I don't want to make a judgment, but this is an XL turbo model. So this one as well, I assume. I haven't used this one before, but this one will give you basically Stable Diffusion XL capabilities, but much faster comparatively. Again, I think usually the outcomes are worse as well compared to like a full XL model. But anyway, this way you can kind of go through. Here's an XL Lightning model, and you can find more information about how to use them when you open them. So I will show you this again in a moment from now, but you can also do it here. I haven't checked this one in particular, but usually these descriptions are right here. These descriptions tell you what kind of settings work best for what model. So in this case, this is a turbo model, right? So it is supposed to work with fewer steps. So here the person writes, turbo version should be used at CFG scale 2 and with 4 to 8 sampling steps. You don't have to understand what this means right now. Just so that you know, you can later find the information, like when you start generating things, you can find the information what settings work best with what model in this kind of model tab here, right? So I want to install one more model, and that's the one model I would recommend to everyone. I don't know why, it's just the one that I like the best. So that one is called ZavyChroma. So we'll just search for ZavyChroma. And then I will find this particular model. So here you can see this is the Stable Diffusion XL model. And for some reason, again, don't ask me why, I totally prefer version 6. So this was further fine-tuned later on. And I don't know, I don't want to say the later models are worse, but just from what I have been doing, the version 6 just always worked the best. So I always go back to Stable Diffusion XL, to the Stable Diffusion XL model, ZavyChroma XL, with version 6. And here as well you will find a lot of helpful information. So this person recommends using a specific sampling method, and we will get to that in a moment, but just so that you know, you can find things here. If I click on import, it will basically start downloading it. So now I can see here the model is downloading in the background, or I mean not yet, hopefully soon. But anyway, this way you can download extra models. So for example, you might start with Stable Diffusion 1.5 as a recommended when we set up Stability Matrix. But maybe you feel like, oh, these generate pretty fast. My hardware seems to be good enough to also run the Stable Diffusion XL model. So you might want to go here and download a more high quality model, for example, in this case. So another thing, if you want to go back, you just empty this and click on search again. I just want to quickly walk you through some other settings here. So you can sort them, of course, kind of self-explanatory. The period, I'm not sure if this is still an issue. I recall this to be an issue in the past. If you go, for example, to like period month or something like that, and then you do a search, and the model didn't get a rating in the last month, it will not be shown at all. So I kind of recommend you to go with all time if you're searching for something in particular. And if you just want to check what's most popular at the moment, you can go with the other ones. But as soon as you use like the search function, I think put it always to all time. I think that's most safe. The next thing is the model type. So here we can find all sorts of different things. For the moment, you will basically only need checkpoint models. So these checkpoint models, again, are the ones that know like all the kind of things that you can generate. So you will need this to generate an image at all. Otherwise, you cannot generate anything. For example, control net models are to control images in a different way. And lastly, you might want to still mention LoRa's. LoRa's are smaller add-on models which you use together with the checkpoint model, right? So if the checkpoint model, for example, cannot produce a specific style, or it cannot produce a specific content of image, you can install or basically download a LoRa and use the checkpoint together with the LoRa in order to kind of add functionality to it. So you might want to look for LoRa sometimes, so I'm just going to do that right now. And here you can see it's like different kind of styles that the base models might not be able to produce. There are a few things here. Maybe, okay, I'm going back to all just to make things a bit more clear. But the base model is the next thing that I already mentioned. We have, and here you can see a lot of different base models. The most common ones that you will want to look at, I assume, are basically SD 1.5. You might also want to look for SD 1.5 LCM. Those are the ones lower quality but even faster, or needing fewer steps at least. And then the other ones that you might want to look at are SDXL 1.0 and SDXL LCM. And then we also have Hyper, Lightning, and Turbo, all different types of ways to make the generation time shorter with still trying to get decent kind of outcomes. So these are the kind of ones you want to look at. So for example, here on the first page, we can see only basically 1.5 models, or here a Pony model. Don't ask me what Pony diffusion really is. It's one of my blind spots, as many people have in this field. I think some people have some blind spots. Mine is Pony or Pony diffusion. But for example, I see too few SDXL examples here, so I'm just going to go to base model SDXL 1.0. And now I can just check the most popular SDXL models. So Juggernaut, for example, would be one of the most popular base model, or like one of the most popular all-around models, kind of like Dream Shaper for Stable Diffusion 1.5. So let me check. Things are still downloading in the background, but we will later get there. Don't worry about that. Another thing to just show you right now so that you've seen it, although we will not work with that today, is the Hugging Face portion. Hugging Face is another platform, or yeah, let's call it a platform where people can publish their AI models and stuff like that. So here we are looking at a bit of different stuff. So here we don't look so much at community fine-trained models, but here we have the very base models, right? But those are usually worse in quality comparatively. We have clip models or / text encoders. Again, we don't need that today. You don't really have to understand that. Here we also have control nets, like the most common control net models, and IP adapter and all that kind of stuff. Again, we don't need any of that today, but if you need that or if you're searching for that later, you can find it here. Civet AI is the other platform that's more focused on community fine-tuned stuff. So that's that. So most of the stuff for generating things you will find here. Then lastly, we have the output browser. This I think is more reliable these days. I used to tell people that you can ignore this basically. But because it used to be like, you can tell it to save the images here, but it kind of never worked in the past. But I think now it's more reliable. So as soon as we generate images, and if you're searching for them, one of the easier ways to find them is to go back to Stability Matrix and go to the output browser, right? And then we also have workflows. Workflows is particular to ComfyUI, so this can be helpful to you, but it might be a bit complicated at the beginning. So we can kind of ignore that, and you will get all the workflows you will need from me for today. So I will give you all the workflows you will need. But maybe you want to check some stuff later, and then you can go in here and kind of get a workflow and use that in ComfyUI. Okay, so we basically have everything set up right now. And I mean, we also have already downloaded the first model, and the second model is still downloading, but it's almost done. So I think we don't even have to go to the version that I prepared, but we can basically stay inside of here. So the first time you're running ComfyUI, you might be a bit confused, or maybe I give you a bit more background at the moment. So I think it's kind of self-explanatory. You click the launch button to launch things, right? But before that, I'm just going to walk you through a few more steps. So here you can check for updates, so you can update your ComfyUI. Generally, updating ComfyUI might cause incompatibility issues if you're using custom nodes later. So if you have a workflow that works for you, you may want to consider not updating, because otherwise it might break a workflow that you're using. But I think it became a bit more reliable these days, but again, it depends also on the custom nodes. Never mind, you will kind of understand that later. Then we have the launch options. Here you can do some more specific stuff, but another great thing is that Stability Matrix kind of figures out the best settings for your system. So you usually don't have to do anything in here unless you are searching for something in particular. And lastly, we have the extensions tab. That's this little icon here. And this will be very important, and we will get to that in a moment, but let's first just start very easily. So again, just click on launch to launch the app. So I'll do that, and now we have basically a command line that's executed, and that's running inside of Stability Matrix. So if you would run this by yourself, or install ComfyUI or RunComfy without Stability Matrix, you would basically have to use your command line. So this is a bit more integrated and easier to follow, I believe. Okay, I will have another sip of water, and then we can already get started with generating our very first images. I don't know what it is today that I have to drink so much. I think I'm talking too much these days. Anyway, so I will walk you through everything here, and I hope you can bear with me drinking in between. Okay, so most of this is kind of self-explanatory again. So we can press the stop button to stop the whole thing going on, right? So as long as we don't click on stop, this will be running in the background. It doesn't really execute anything really besides just running a local server. So as long as you're not generating things, you don't have to be worried about like, oh, I forgot to stop it, but just so that you know. Restart also self-explanatory. We will get back to that button in a moment. And then also self-explanatory and important though, is the Open WebUI button over here. So a few things about that. Usually you know that ComfyUI is running as soon as you see this line in the command line, right? So it says to see the GUI or GUI, go to, and then HTTP, // and then a combination of numbers. If you're not familiar with this, this basically means that you are running a local server. So when you're opening the browser now, it doesn't mean that you're connected to the internet. You can do all of this, like after you downloaded all the things from the internet, of course, you can do everything without an internet connection. So that's great in comparison to like Midjourney, DALL-E, and all the other ones. Now you have a few ways to open this. The most easy one is clicking this button on top, but you can also just select this and copy this. Oops. Yeah, I didn't mean to do that, so right-click also opens it. But if we didn't do it like that, but instead we went like this, we can also click the Open WebUI icon button, and this will open ComfyUI, right? So I can close all the other stuff in the background. And now we already have everything to generate an image. So before we do anything, I will just show you how to generate your first image to begin with, right? So in order to generate something, you just have to click this button here, Q prompt, and that will just do everything for you. And at the end, you get an image out of this. So here you can see what's going on, right? And now I will kind of walk you through all these different settings and things that might seem intimidating at first, but they are all not so complicated. I think they're quite self-explanatory. Like even if you just spend some time looking at it, I think you will kind of understand, but I'll try to make it more easy for you. So the first thing is this here. So just in general, if you want to move something around, just have your left mouse button clicked and then just drag things around. Pretty self-explanatory as well. So this is the load checkpoint model. I mentioned the word checkpoint a few times right now. So checkpoints I usually refer to, or we refer to checkpoints as the kind of models that generate the image, right? So here you will find all the models that you have downloaded. So right now, I guess the other one's still downloading in the background. I only have Dreamshaper. So when I click on here, I can select all the ones that I have installed so far or downloaded. You don't have to install them. They just have to be in the right folder. So in this case, maybe I'm clicking refresh again. So here I'm clicking refresh and now it shows both the models. Great. So if you cannot see something that should be there, maybe just click on this refresh icon here. And now in the meantime, the model downloaded. So now I have two models to choose from. So ZavyChroma XL as my Stable Diffusion XL model and Dreamshaper 8 as my Stable Diffusion 1.5 model. Right. So that's that. Just select the model you want to use. Then we have these two text boxes here. The first text box, we can kind of start to untangle this a little bit, just give us a bit more space to see what is connecting. So if I want to, see what this connects to, I can just move it around a little bit. So now I can see it comes from the load checkpoint and it goes into the KSampler here. So it comes from clip, all the kind of things related to text or text encoding. Here you can also see clip text encoder comes from the model in these cases. Like there are also ways to kind of separate them, but many of the most common models kind of have everything in one file basically, right? So here they all both connect to the clip thing from the load model, and here the conditioning connects here to the positive part, right? So this already kind of tells us what is going on here. You can also already see if you hover on top of it, it will also explain the most important stuff. So that's good to know. Sometimes these explanations are probably better than what I'm telling you right now, so just feel free to hover over things and they will explain to you again. So this is basically the prompt, the explanation of the image that we want to create. So here the standard is beautiful scenery, nature, glass, bottle, landscape, purple, galaxy, bottle, right? So there are a few things we can think and consider when writing prompts, but for the moment you can just put anything in there, right? So in this case, maybe I want to produce something different. So I'm just gonna say photo of an apple, right? So if I want to check what happens now, I just click on Q prompt again and I can see a photo of an apple. It's a very random kind of image, but we also put a random prompt in it, so we shouldn't expect too much. Then the second thing that we see here connects to the negative part here, right? So here we can see the prompt text and watermark. So this is, in simple terms, while we are generating the image, right? So we are generating the image of an apple or the photo of an apple. We are simultaneously generating a second image, and that's like the negative image. And then in every step of generating the image, we kind of subtract the negative part, like the thing that we don't want, from the positive part. This is really helpful because if you don't use that, I mean, there are models that don't need that, but in the past, if you didn't use this negative prompt, you would get kind of like strange and very unparticular kind of images. So you can use the negative prompt to get more specifically to an image that you want to generate. So in this case, it just says text and watermark because those are usually images, like let's say in the data set. The model, basically for training the model, the people from Stability AI or the people who developed Stable Diffusion basically went through all the internet and downloaded all sorts of images, and there might be photos with watermarks or text on it, and this is kind of trying to filter that out, or at least tell the model what it should not create. One thing to consider, and we will talk about this a little bit later, but I'm also already going to start with this now, although it's not super advisable here. But generally speaking, these models are not censored, right? So they can create all sorts of problematic and strange kind of images. So they can create pornographic content, they can create gore, blood, whatever, like very many things that, for example, DALL-E and all the other kind of AIs like the like Midjourney and so on and so forth, the commercial ones, will not allow you to generate. So I guess in some sense it is positive because at least it doesn't prevent you from doing that. But let's assume that we don't want to do or like want to generate things. The thing that is most common is that you, like when you start generating people, they will just be naked all of a sudden, right? So a quick tip to prevent that is to add the negative prompts NSFW, so not safe for work, and for example, nude or something like that. So these will prevent us from getting like naked people basically, right? Generally, to keep in mind, the negative prompt is not supposed to be used with negated terms, right? So you're not supposed to put in here like not NSFW or not nude, but you're supposed to put in the positive term, right? Because this will generate the thing that you don't want. So you want to have it in positive terms, if that makes sense, right? So if I want to, let's say, if I want to generate an apple and I don't want to generate a pear, for example, I'm not going to say not pear, I'm just going to say pear, right? Makes sense, hopefully, right? So these are the basic things already where you can do most of the things with, right? So like if you want to stop here, you can already generate like tons of images now, and right? So this is already great. If you want to take a break from here because it's too much or you're a bit overwhelmed, just play around with this and return to this when you have time for it, right? So, but there are a few more things to talk about still to like get the most out of this. For one, we have the empty latent image. I will explain this in a bit more detail when we talk about the steps and the KSampler, but for the moment you just have to keep in mind that what I told you earlier, Stable Diffusion 1.5 models are trained on 512 by 512 pixel images, so we want to use the appropriate resolution here for the model that we're using, right? So if I would decide now to load a Stable Diffusion XL model like ZavyChroma XL version 6, I know that Stable Diffusion XL models are trained on 1024 by 1024 pixel images. So I want to, in this case, I would want to go back to the empty latent image and change the resolution here. A few things, like for one, you can just type in the number that you want, just click on it, type it in and click enter or click on the OK. But it can also do math, which is great. So you can just say multiply by 2 and it should give you the right outcome. So that's pretty nice. With the batch size, you can basically tell it how many images it's supposed to generate, if it's just supposed to generate one image or a lot of images, one after the other. So in this case, I'm just going to try what I just prepared, right? So I have ZavyChroma XL, I'm using a Stable Diffusion XL model. I decided for, or wrote my prompts, positive and negative, and now I'm generating a higher resolution image, and I'm just going to keep all the other settings the same. And now I can click Q prompt. This will take a while generally for you to know. Every time you change a model, it will have to load the model basically into the memory. Well, I'm not gonna try to explain now, but you will have to like load the model into ComfyUI basically, right? So it will take a lot more time, or like a bit more time, when you first load a new model. So in this case, it generates a new image, and it's an apple, and it looks quite a bit different than Stable Diffusion 1.5. And we can still improve this, but just so that you know. So again, for the moment, I'm going to stay with Stable Diffusion XL, just because I think it produces the nicer kind of images, but just stay with Stable Diffusion 1.5 if you don't have great hardware. Another thing to consider now, a tip I just want to give to you, if you're watching this live stream and you are generating things on your PC right now, or on your computer right now, maybe consider watching this stream on a second device like your tablet or phone, because we are doing something very hardware intense, right? So we are generating these images with our GPU and partially maybe the CPU in your case. So it makes sense to just close everything in the background, not to kind of dump unnecessary RAM, for example, or like information into the VRAM. Like if you're watching a video on the side, this kind of might make things slower or not work as nicely as they would otherwise. So also something you might want to consider, just closing all your other windows, all your other programs, and restarting your PC. That's usually a good thing to do too. So just for you to consider. So now we can continue with the KSampler. And here I can explain a little bit more about all sorts of things. This is kind of the heart and the core of everything. And by the way, while I'm taking another sip of water, please feel free to write in the chat and ask any questions if you have any, and we can talk about them here, and I can respond to them live. So please feel free to text in the chat. So about the KSampler. Again, the KSampler is kind of the heart of everything, like all the important settings you will find here, like besides the prompt and the model and everything, this is kind of where the image is generated. So let's go from the top to the bottom. The seed is basically a random number, but it is random because we have this control after generation, which is set to randomize, right? So this thing down here determines what is happening up here. So I could also go in here and just put a number in there, let's say 1, 2, 3, and it can be basically any natural number. And we can just put it in there, and then we have the seed. The control after generation is basically saying, like, if I put it to fixed, it will always be the same seed. And if I put it to increment, it will just, after every image that I generate, it will go one up higher, right, like this, and decrement would just go down, and randomize would just put a new random number in there. But again, what does that even mean? What is this number about? What does, like, it's just a number, right? So the seed is something like the DNA of the image. When we generate images with Stable Diffusion, and the same happens in all the other kind of image generation models too, for the most part, we always start with a completely random Gaussian noise, or basically a completely random combination of pixels, like noise. The great thing about this is that since we have theoretically an infinite state of different kind of noise configurations, we can theoretically generate an infinite amount of different images from there. So we might start with a finite set of images, like we just go scrape the internet, take a lot of images, tag them, and train our model to understand what image and what kind of text produces what kind of image, what kind of patterns. So that is a finite set, of course. We don't have infinite anything, I guess, other than the universe, perhaps. But by using random noise, like this kind of infinite combination of random pixels, we can theoretically generate like an infinite amount of different outcomes. I hope that makes sense. Maybe it doesn't make so much sense, but we will get to that in a moment, hopefully. So anyway, just keep in mind, we always start with a completely random noise, like just a gray or black kind of, I don't know, just noise, and we want to get to an image. So start with noise, get to image. That's kind of the thing to keep in mind. And now if we, for example, put this to fixed, and if we put a seed in here, like 1, 2, 3, for example, and we keep all the other settings the same, we can just demonstrate that quickly. I'm just going to generate something, right? So if I'm going to use this exact seed and keep everything else the same, and I click on generate again, it will not do anything, right? I put it on fixed and it will not do anything. That is because it will always create the exact same image. Same settings and same seed are always the exact same image. So ComfyUI kind of knows that and kind of saves you from like basically generating the same image over and over again. If I put it, for example, to increment, right? And I'm clicking generate again, like first it doesn't do anything because it was still a 1, 2, 3. And now if I click it again, it will go to, or like right now it's generating the seed 1, 2, 4. So basically it's generating a completely new random image. I hope that makes sense. Usually you can kind of just keep that at randomize because the common goal is to just generate like different types of images. But for example, if you want to kind of test what settings change what kind of thing, I would put this to fixed, for example, and that's something we can do right now. I'll put it to fixed and give it a fixed seed. So when we change anything else, we know that this other setting changed the outcome, right? So the next thing is steps. To recall, we start with completely random noise and we want to get to a final image. The way Stable Diffusion works is that the model is trained to predict noise, basically. So if I'm gonna tell it, as in this case, photo of an apple, we will start from the complete random noise, and Stable Diffusion will try to predict, okay, what kind of noise do I have to subtract from the completely random noise to get closer to the photo of an apple? I hope that makes sense, right? So completely random noise, and then we, for example, have an image. Like the next step would be to go to a photo of an apple with 90% noise. So we start with 100% noise, and the next step would be, okay, photo of an apple with 90% noise. And then we go from 90% to 80%, for example, and then, right, photo of an apple with 80% noise, 70%, so on and so forth. The idea behind this is that it's very difficult to just completely predict an image in like from nowhere, right? It's very difficult to just go from like completely random noise to final image in just one step. But it's much better at generating images when it can take like these few steps and kind of improve the image like incrementally, just a little bit every time. And this way we can get much nicer images than if we would want to try, or if we would try to just like denoise a completely random noise image to the final outcome. So these steps basically tell us how often we want to reduce noise from the image. I'll give you a few points for that you might want to consider when you use models. But as I mentioned before, the best thing usually is to go into the description of the model that you're using. And usually, or hopefully, they will tell you like, oh, my model works best with, let's say, 20 steps of denoising. And some might say, okay, for my model, you have to use 80 steps. Or some will say like, okay, you can maximally use, or you can use a maximum of 4 steps, and after that, it's going to look strange. So in this case, I'm just going to give you like rough estimates of a general ballpark of where what kind of model is best situated in terms of denoising steps. So with Stable Diffusion 1.5, you're pretty much fine with, I guess, like anything from like 10 steps perhaps to maybe, I don't know, 40, 50, 60 steps. I'm not sure if after that it still gets better. And one thing to consider is that there is a bell curve, right? Okay, so let me reset a little bit, right? So Stable Diffusion 1.5 typically, let's say, can work with steps from like 10 to 40 denoising steps. I'm not really sure where the peak is, but the idea is that we are still subtracting noise every time, right? So you can already imagine if we have all the noise subtracted from an image, right? Like take your photo, for example, if you're taking a photo with your camera, you can go into like a photo editing software and like reduce noise, right? Take noise away. But at some point there is no noise left. So when it tries to take noise away from it, it will kind of start to break the image apart. That's why it's a bell curve. Like if I would put this to like 1,000 steps right now, it wouldn't be like 100 times better or something. It would basically look horrible, right? So you always have to find like a range that works best and kind of see what your like price performance ratio is. So in this case, if I use Stable Diffusion 1.5, I'm pretty safe with like around 20 steps. If I use Stable Diffusion XL, I would usually recommend going a bit higher. So I'm using Stable Diffusion XL right now. So let's just try that. I'm just going to put it to fixed and generate an image. And let's look at that image. So we can kind of compare things, right? I put the C to fixed. So now if I'm, so this is that image. Looks pretty fine. But let's say I'm going to like 60 steps, 3 times the steps. Now we can generate it again from the same noise. So it will look very close to it, but it will have basically 40 extra denoising steps. So now we can kind of look at how that changes the content. I can already see like the leaves are looking a bit different, maybe a bit more defined. They have a bit of a different position. So now you can see that's pretty nice. Here we can see like, I think this was not there before. All these like dots were not there before. So it added quite a bit of detail to it. By the way, in the background, you will hear my GPU going pretty loud. I hope it's not too loud, but I hope it will be fine. So anyway, I hope you kind of can already see like this already added like quite a bit of detail to it. Maybe that's also a good point right now to check where the images are going. Yeah, I will do that right now. Maybe I will just, okay, let's just check the output browser to see if things are here. Right, okay. So this is an easy way to check them. So now I can open them here and can kind of compare them, right? So here we have like 20 steps and here we have 60 steps, and we can see like it added quite a bit of detail to it. And this is a way you can check where your images are. The important thing is, and I had students approach me, okay, I'm seeing a question, I will get to that in a moment. I had student ask me, okay, where, like, is it even saving the images? Because this might only look like a preview, but here you can see it's the save image node. So for example, there would also be the preview image node. This will not save it, this will only show it to you. So if I'm putting that here and just generate this, it will look pretty similar, but again, preview does not save it. Here I can do a right click and save image, for example, but I basically just want to save all my images, so I'm just going to keep it here, right? Okay, so the question, and I'm gonna try, let's just try that for fun. Let's see if the text-to-speech works. Let's see if the whole thing works. I hope it's not gonna be too awkward, but let's give it a try. So
HQYG says, how much RAM does your system have in order to use 60 steps?
Okay. I hope you were able to hear that, so we can talk about things like this now. I don't have to read them out awkwardly, and if I'm mispronouncing things, it's not my fault. I can put it on the computer, right? So in my case, I'm having 12 gigabytes of VRAM. I am not sure if the steps are thresholded, if the VRAM is the threshold for the amount of steps, basically. I'm not sure about that. I assume so, because I mean it has to like keep, I guess, the memory of all the different steps in it, but I'm not sure if that is VRAM specific. So perhaps just try. Generally speaking, the steps just make it go on longer. It's not even slower, it just takes longer to get to the final image. So that's something to keep in mind. Again, one way to, thank you for the question, first and foremost, I should have said that to begin with. But anyway, we were talking about the steps, right, to go from completely random noise to the image. So in this case, I'm just going to change the settings. I'm just going to go to 80 just for the fun of it. And now we can look at the KSampler a little bit, right? So this is basically illustrating how this whole thing works. If I'm pressing Q prompt, you will see here it starts like very grainy. You can see like it starts from this kind of random dark-ish noise, and here we can kind of see the steps happening, right? Like the thing you see here is like all the steps kind of denoising it. Another thing you will realize here is that the result here looks a bit different than what we get here. That's what the VAED code is for. So this basically takes the image out of, let's say, the AI space, So we have this latent space, right? This empty latent space. It takes it out of this latent space and puts it back into pixel space. That's why the final image looks much nicer than what we see in the KSampler. So don't worry if you're only looking at this and you're like, well, why is it so bad? Like just look over here and check that you're decoding the image and that you're saving it here, right? Okay, so 80 steps. Actually, I think in this case already you can see something we might want to look at. Just for the fun of it, I'm refreshing it here. So honestly, I think the 60 steps one looks a bit better because this kind of doesn't make a lot of sense, super much sense from the perspective, right? So I think the 60 steps one is actually better than the 80 steps one. So you can already see there's like a bell curve. Of course, this still looks both fine, but like if we go like 1,000 steps, it would look horrible. So the next setting, let's look at CFG scale. So we can hover again on top of this, over this, and it will give us an explanation. I will try to give you my kind of worst explanation of that perhaps. So the CFG scale, it stands for Classifier Free Guidance Scale, and you don't really have to understand what that means. The basic idea behind this is that if the value is higher, it will pay more attention to your prompt. And if the value is lower, it will kind of be more creative, right? So if, for example, I have a very specific prompt, what would be a very specific prompt? I don't know, something, I'm not sure. I don't have a good example for this. I'm not going to try. I'm not going to try to make a bad example. Anyway, if I have like a very specific thing in my prompt and it kind of ignores that in all the generations, it might have to increase the CFG scale. So maybe I want to go to 12 in order to go more towards what I want to generate. So we can just try, right? We're still with the fixed seed. So now we can see like the difference of the CFG scale in comparison. Like, yeah, it's just the CFG scale that's impacting the difference that we will be seeing right now. So if I want to have something in there and my prompt is kind of ignored in one way or the other, it might be helpful to go up here. For example, here, that's just a random interpretation, but we see a fewer leaves and we see like a second apple. So perhaps one way in which it is more adherent to our prompt right now is that we never specified anything but the apple, right? We never said like apple and XYZ. So theoretically, it should actually only generate an apple, and the kind of surrounding things are already interpreted by the AI in a sense. So if we really only want to get an apple, maybe we put the CFG scale higher. So 12 is already kind of where it's, I don't know, kind of the maximum. We can just, for the fun of it, I'll just put it to 30. I never did this, but it will probably look quite strange, I assume. It doesn't look that bad even. But here, as well, you will kind of realize that there is like a maximum amount that makes sense. So let's look at this. Yeah, like now it starts to get like, that's a characteristic you can see when you have the CFG scale too high. It will kind of get like very intense, I guess. Very contrasty, very flat-ish looking. So this would be something that I would not recommend you to do. The other way around, you can also decrease it. So if I put it to the value of a value of 2, for example, it will have more freedom to interpret the prompt, like it can generate more things around it. So in this case, interestingly, I guess it's even more focused on the apple right now, which I'm not sure if I understand why that is happening. But theoretically, if you go lower with the CFG, you give the AI some more freedom to interpret the prompt. Yeah, this looks much more photorealistic. In this case, it looks much nicer. I couldn't tell you why in this particular case, but well, lower CFG worked fine. So usually I would recommend you to use values between like 2 and 12 for Stable Diffusion 1.5 and for Stable Diffusion XL. Again, there are models that work differently with this value. For example, Flux is a comparatively newer model that doesn't use the CFG scale because it doesn't use negative prompts. So that there it would be basically obsolete to even think of a value or put a value in there. Other models, like for example these faster models or models that work with fewer steps, like Lightning model, Turbo model, or LCM models, they commonly have to take a lower CFG scale, so they are usually only allowing to use 1 or 2 as a CFG scale. So that's something you will have to keep in mind depending on what model you're using. So I actually like the CFG 2 the best, so I'll just keep it at that for the moment. Now we have 2 more settings, and those are the settings I suggested to you earlier that you might want to check the model description. So I'm just going to do that right now. So this is a specific, or it's not specific to a model, but it can be specific to a model. So if I go to my checkpoint models, I'll have to see, yes, okay, that's great. So here I can go to the checkpoint manager and browse my models. And in this case, we are using ZavyChroma XL. So here I can check the model description and kind of see what the creator of the model suggests, right? So here I can see the person writing, consider using DPM double plus 3M SDE exponential or SDE Keras. I personally like them best, 3M SDE Expo for most styles and so on and so forth. So even if you don't understand what this means, you can kind of like look for the right terms, like you will get used to them. So in this case, I can already see, oh, that's a scheduler and a sampling type. So I can keep that in mind. And if I go back to ComfyUI, I can click on the scheduler, and here, oops. Oh, that's a. I'm confused right now as well. I'm not sure why it doesn't give me the options. Oh no, wait, I clicked on scheduler. Never mind, I'm very sorry. That was stupid. Never mind. So I remember the person said DPM double plus 3M SDE. That's what the person said. So here we have 2 different samplers, not schedulers, that kind of fit the description. So we have the SDE and the SDE GPU. So generally, if you have a decent graphics card, you probably want to use GPU. I did some testing yesterday and I couldn't find a difference in the generation times when using SDE and SDE GPU. They both used my GPU fully and they just produced different outcomes. So I cannot tell you which one is better. Actually, I used SDE for the most time because I used to have an error where the GPU one didn't really use my GPU, surprisingly. But anyway, something to keep in mind. Maybe you want to just go back and forth and just try both and see what works better. And the scheduler here, we can see exponential. That's what the person suggested. It's now fixed seed, so we will start with the same outcome, not the same outcome, obviously, the same noise to start with. We have all the same settings as with this generation, or this image that we generated, and now we just changed the sampler and the scheduler to what the person recommended who trained that model. So let's see how that looks any different. So I can already see it's quite interesting, quite a different perspective. But from what I can tell right now, also, by the way, this one takes longer now. That's something I should mention. So this one I like a lot as well. And perhaps it's actually the best one so far. Like the leaves look very realistic and everything looks kind of nice. Interestingly, this is the first time it's connecting a branch to the kind of here, the branch of the apple. It doesn't look super realistic, but at least it connected it for the first time. The other ones look kind of strange with that. So I personally, as I said, I use ZavyChroma XL version 6 for a lot of things, and I always use the sampler and schedule that the person recommended, in this case DPM double plus 3M SDE. You can also generate this with the GPU version now. Again, it will actually create a different kind of image, but very similar anyway. So here I can see already the branches even more connected, but as I also said before, this will take a bit longer. So the exponential scheduler will usually take a bit longer. So again, very nice image. So we can go back to our output browser again, just refresh this and can kind of check the compare them. So maybe the GPU one's even better now that I'm looking at it. But this might also change from image to image and from generation to generation. There's no like final truths about any of this. Okay, so that was your basic introduction to how to generate images, right? So with this, you can already do anything theoretically, right? You can just generate all of the images and kind of play around with the settings. I'm also going to put this back to randomize to get like a bit more, yeah, random images. I will take a very short break because I have to get more water. I'm sorry, my voice is giving out or giving up. But then we will look at some other things. Here we are kind of now, in the next step, we are looking at different ways to find interesting prompts. So that's our goal for the next step. And again, I'm just gone for like 30 seconds. So if you're watching this after the fact, you can just skip ahead. If you're watching this live, just give me a few seconds and I'll be right back. And then we will look at how to make better prompts and all that kind of stuff. And if you have any questions, leave them in the chat while I'm gone and I'll get to them as soon as I'm back. Again, just a minute. Hello, so here we are again. Hopefully everything is still working fine. I had to take something for my throat, I'm very sorry, but we will get through this, but sorry for the longer break. So one thing you might be wondering right now, and I mean basically the most important thing of all is that you write good prompts. I mean, okay, I'm not want to exaggerate, it's not just the prompt, but prompts are a very core element of the whole thing, right? You can already imagine, I believe. So there are a few ways how we can get better. How we can get better at writing prompts. So in this case, in the first example, I want to use a reference image. So of course we can use AI to kind of recreate something that looks very, very similar to the reference image, but that would kind of be boring. So we kind of want to take elements of the reference image and kind of create something new with it. Usually, at least I would assume. So this is a random image. It's kind of very popular on Pinterest. So there you find the source to Pinterest. But now we can take that image. So if you are following along with the slides that are posted in the chat and in the video description, you can right click and save it if you want to. And then you can go and use an image captioning tool, for example. So image captioning, there are generally two kind of things, image captioning and image tagging. So this one will produce more of like an explanation of the image. But that is a fun and interesting way to get a new prompt. So I can open that in a new tab. This is a relatively recent model that is quite good, better than models that I used to work with in the past. And here you can just put an image. So in my case, where is it? I can just drop that image here and then put some settings here. So I can say, for example, I want like a Midjourney type prompt and I want it to be a medium length. And then I can click on caption and this will be running on this like virtual GPU or like cloud GPU, right? So I'm just using Hugging Face, which I mentioned earlier, where you can download all kind of models as well. And it will now do this on someone else's machine, this kind of virtual machine. So now I can get this prompt. I also did this before. If you don't want to do this, by yourself, I clicked on this again. But here, this is the kind of thing that I got the last time I used this. But this one seems just fine as well. So I can just copy that prompt and start working with that prompt. So in this case, let me just put that prompt in here. And I can definitely keep the NSFW, in and the node in. And now I can keep my model. All the other settings still pretty fine. I'm going to put the CFG scale back to like maybe to 6, something like that, because I wanted to follow the prompt a bit more closely, I guess. And now all the other settings we already talked about. And now I can queue prompt and kind of see what this generates. So I did this in the past with very little success, but that will be the whole point of this, I promise you. This will look kind of strange, but I will show you later how to make it less strange. So anyway, so this is the image we generate from this, and it looks interesting. I hope the background noise is not too much with the GPU fans. I hope that's about fine. But let's talk a little bit about how that is different. So the hoodedness and like the kind of covered face works pretty well, which I'm surprised by. The style is completely off. And yeah, it doesn't really match the style. But I think content-wise, it's already going in the right direction, kind of like covering everything but the face in that sense, right? But there are more ways to do things like this. For one, you can put all sorts of images in there and just get something to start with, because like this is already a much more defined thing than what you would probably come up with if you just type something down. So this can help you to get started. So just here, one way we could improve this is just go back into the literal text and kind of change the things that don't really fit what we want here. Another way to work with this is and this we will see in the next slides, is using AI to generate prompts, right? So in this case, we can only put the image in to the kind of analysis tool, let's call it like that, and get something out, but we cannot talk with it, right? It's not like ChatGPT. It's basically just one input, one output, right? And sometimes maybe we want to have a more interactive style and kind of like get better incrementally. So one way to do this is to use Ollama and a model that is particularly trained to generate prompts. So Ollama, you can just open it and download it and run it. It's pretty easy. like self-explanatory in the way you install it. Just make 2 clicks and you have it installed. And this is basically a tool that allows you to run large and small language models locally on your device. So instead of using, for example, ChatGPT, this is running something like ChatGPT on your local device. Something like, as we generate images with ComfyUI, we can also generate text or do this kind of chatbot thing locally with our own hardware. So the cool thing about this is that there are people who spend time basically training a model on prompts, right? So you can put any training data into these models, theoretically at least. And here Impact Frames, a great contributor to the larger community already. They basically went and used a large language model and kind of gave it here the like 50,000 high quality Stable Diffusion prompts to make it learn how to write good prompts, right? So again, this is not like the be all end all and not the perfect way to write a prompt, but it can help you a lot to kind of get started, especially if you're stuck with something. So how do we do this? So I already have Ollama installed. And you can just install it as I showed you, just download and do 2 clicks and it should be fine right away. Now there are different ways to start this. So for one, and this will be different between macOS and Linux and Windows, I can only show you this on Windows. I got it to work on macOS once, but it's kind of more confusing to me, so please just do or like check another tutorial how to use Ollama on macOS, but it should work. So there are a few ways to run this. Once you have it installed, I can just copy this code and just go into my command line. So I'm just searching for CMD. There are 1,000 ways to open the command line or the command prompt. In this case, I'm just going to do it like that. I'm going to open it and I can just put in Ollama run and then the model I want to run. So the first time I run this, it will download the model. So that's about 5 gigabytes. In my case, I already downloaded it, so now we can start it right away. So again, if you're doing this for the first time, it will download it and then it will start it automatically. And every other time you just do the same thing. So regardless if this is the first or the 10th or the X time you do this, it's always the same thing. And in this case, it will always give you this kind of standard start prompt. And for example, now I can say like create create a prompt, and I have to learn writing, create a prompt for an image that generates create a prompt that generates an image of a person hooded, can you say that? Maybe. Face covered, only eyes showing, but not. Okay, anyway, let's try that first. So I can just enter that now, and it will start to create a prompt for me. And the interesting thing here, just to talk about it a little bit in terms of theory, is, and I can also zoom into that a little bit more so you can see it better. The idea behind this is that the AI was basically trained on understanding how Stable Diffusion prompts work, right? So if I'm using my own words to create a prompt, I'm using basically my kind of language, right? It's a kind of difficult task to interpret what Stable Diffusion understands when I'm using specific words, right? So the AI here just helps me translate my own thoughts into a kind of language that Stable Diffusion understands. So in this case, I'm just gonna put that in here and I'm just gonna generate that and see how that looks, if it looks any better, any different. So it looks worse already, but anyway, you can kind of get it. We'll get to the cool part in just a moment. One thing to consider, I think you can already see it here, and maybe now you can also hear it in the background. Something I would recommend you to avoid is having Ollama run in the background while you're generating things, because now you have 2 things occupying your GPU basically. In my case, my PC is like good enough to run this. But if you're on a laptop or something, you might have to close Ollama first in order to run this well. So in that case, for example, in my case, on Windows, here in the system tray, we can find Ollama, and now I can just go quit Ollama. I think it doesn't quit fully if I close the command prompt, so that's like the more safe way to do it. So if you want to free resources, make sure to kind of close that, right? So the cool thing now is though, okay, I really don't like the result of that, but since it's an AI, since it's a chat bot basically, I can go in and tell it what I don't like, tell it what I don't like, and kind of go back and forth and improve the prompt via like my natural language rather than like trying to improve the prompt. So I don't like the result yet. It's too dark and dramatic. I want it to have a more indie aesthetic. I'm not sure if I'm spelling that right. With bright colors. Also, the face is not fully covered with that prompt. So I can kind of tell it what I don't like, what I want to improve. And this way the AI can kind of, okay, I already see that this is bad because it adds like typography. I can already go back with it and tell it something like, I don't want it to use this pop art aesthetic, rather something minimalistic, high fashion, something like this, right? And now it will give me a very different kind of prompt, I believe. So let's try this. And I think this will already look quite a bit better than at least what we had before. So I'll just generate that and see what we get out of this. Again, now I think you can already see it's kind of getting much slower. So in my case now, I'm just gonna, like for one, I'm gonna close the command prompt, just close the window, and probably that will speed things up, but in my case, I'm also just quitting Ollama. So yeah, maybe the image still doesn't look great in that sense, but still, I think it's a fun and interesting way to make different prompts and perhaps better prompts. There's another cool thing that you can also do. Maybe you already did it yourself right now, but that's already interesting, the outcome, I mean. Anyway, so there's another thing. If you're on Windows, you can do something very helpful. You can create a bat file or a batch file. That is basically a file type that can execute the command prompt. So for one, I just prepared one, so you can just download it. I already downloaded it to my hard drive, or yeah, external drive, not hard drive. And here we have it. And this is basically, if you right click on that, you can go into Edit Notepad. And here we'll just show you what's happening. So the thing I showed you earlier here is just inside of this bat file. And now every time I'm double clicking that, it will execute that, right? So just to illustrate this, here we go. If I double click that, it will start. Oh, wait, what? I mean, yeah, okay. I did this myself, and we can see it's only one line of code, so I can run it anyway. Same for you, I hope. And now it's just running the same thing I had here, and now it's starting Ollama. So that's an easy way. You can just put that on your desktop. You can also create it yourself with the Notepad. It's very easy, but you can also download it from the slides if you are so inclined. Okay, let's close Ollama again, and let's go to the next thing. So I'm still very much not happy with the kind of things we generated so far. That is mostly because it's kind of like, I don't know, I'm not a big fan of the style. I couldn't get it to get these kind of like more cream kind of colors and all that kind of stuff that I was originally looking for. So a way to fix this is to use image-to-image generation. So this, what I'm going to show you now, is something I don't see many people do on the internet, and I spend a lot of time in some kind of AI communities on the internet, but somehow I don't really see this a lot. Maybe people do this and don't talk about it, I don't know. Or maybe I'm just not seeing it, but I love the following technique that I'm going to show you. So to start things, I mean, generally we briefly talked about it, like Stable Diffusion just scraped the internet for all kinds of images. So Stable Diffusion is always trained, as far as I can tell, on partially or partly copyrighted material, right? So this is a general issue, and there are lawsuits about this, and I'm not sure where the development will go long term with this. I can actually kind of not imagine that there will be some kind of ban, I don't know. But at least to avoid getting into another copyright issue, when we want to do image-to-image generation, I really like to use public domain images, right? So these are images that are completely available completely for free, and you can basically do with them whatever you want for commercial use, changing them, using them in collages and all that kind of stuff. So you can basically freely use those images. And there's a great project, a great GitHub repository and website that's called Museo.app. So you can also open the website. I just have it here as an iframe. And this is basically a search engine. It calls itself a visual search engine that looks for public domain images. So one thing I love to do is to just search for things that are not content-wise related, but kind of texture-wise related. So in this case, I'm just searching, for example, for the term paper. So now it's going to search for things that are somehow related to paper. And now I can kind of take one of those images where it's really not about the content, but just kind of the texture and the feel of it. So this is kind of fun. I like this quite a bit. I never used this one before, but I like it. Has like a bit of color variation, but still very basic, very kind of, yeah, basic colors. Okay, this is non-commercial use. Non-commercial use, okay. So this would be non-commercial use, so that's a bad one. I will use it right now because this is, okay, maybe I'm using a different one just to be on the very safe side, but I'm kind of surprised about that. Okay, here, this is another bad-ish example. I'm sorry for giving you bad examples, but this way maybe you can skip some things. So the Rijksmuseum is great, but you have to have an account, and I have one, but I'm not logged into it right now. So this is a bit too basic for my taste. How about this one? Okay, so here we are in the New York Public Library. So they usually say, yeah, here, the New York Public Library believes that this item is in the public domain under the laws of the United States, but didn't make a determination as to its copyright status under the copyright law of other countries. So usually these New York Public Library images are relatively safe, I would say. So, and they are also very easy to download. So this is kind of a boring one, but anyway, let's get it anyway, and you can just download it in any resolution. In this case, I'm going to download it in the 1060 pixel resolution. This doesn't look like 1060 pixels, so I'm just going to go with the original one. That also doesn't look great. Okay. Okay, this is a bad resolution file. We are going through a lot of bad examples, I'm very sorry. But we will find something eventually. Something that kind of works. And this one is interesting as well. Is this also non-commercial use? Non-commercial use as well, never mind. Not that I'm not making any money with this live stream, but theoretically. How about this one? Let's just go through some. Okay. Yeah, I don't like that there's so much going on in the center, but at least it's higher in resolution, perhaps. I guess it's too high in resolution because this is loading very, very slowly. Okay, this looks a bit better. Okay, we will just use that. It might not be the greatest example, but we will get to a good example later as well, I promise you. So, okay, let's just download that. So now we want to do image-to-image generation. And I am going to show you something at first, and then I'm going to give you a bit more context in a moment. Okay, so we have our image now. And if we go to ComfyUI, you might ask yourself, okay, where does the image go, right? We only have this like empty latent image, and that's not in the pixel space. Yeah, it's not in the pixel space yet, I guess. It's just random noise. So where do we put our image? So theoretically, and I'm going to show you I'm going to show you this first so that you can see how it works in theory, but there's something to keep in mind, so please don't execute this prompt just yet. I will show you why. So we usually just start with like double clicking into empty space, left mouse, double click, right? So this gives us this kind of search thing here. So the first thing we have to do is to load our image, right? So I'm just going to search for load, and it's going to give me all the things I can load. In this case, I want to load an image, right? So this is the standard example image. You can do stuff with that as well. There's nothing wrong with this. But in this case, I already got my own image, so I'm going to put my own image in here, right? Now, you will figure that you cannot just put the image into the KSampler, right? Like there's just no connection, and they use different colors, which usually already tells you it doesn't really work like that. As I suggested earlier, or as I tried to explain earlier, we have this VAE decode step, which basically takes it from the latent space into the pixel space. So now, in order to use an image, we first have to get it into the right space, basically, right? So we have this pixel space image, and we have to get it into the latent space, into the latent image. So instead of decoding the image, we have to encode it now. So there are two things to do this. Like first, we can just delete this one, right? The empty latent image. We don't need that anymore because we're not using the random noise. I'm just going to delete it. Here we have the image now, and there's, as I showed you, you can double click to create a new node, or you can just drag something out of here and just let it go. And this gives you a few options. For one, it will tell you like the most common things to do from that kind of endpoint, or you can search again, right? So here it will already tell you or only give you the options that you have with this kind of image output thing. So in this case, we already can see here VAE encode. So I can already click on that, and it will create the VAE encode. So that's the kind of thing that puts it into the latent space, like from the pixel space to the latent space, basically. Another way I can do this is like double click and just go VAE encode. And then I click on VAE encode, and I can connect it like this, right? So you can already see there's like the VAE thing here, right? And we also have the VAE decode here, and both, as you can see, both connect to the load checkpoint. So the VAE in many models is kind of included inside of the model. Again, you don't have to understand what VAE stands for, what it means. Just know that it comes from there and that it usually connects these like in these ways. So now I can just connect this and that. You can also see it fits from the color. And now I can put it into the latent. Now, we will not press or click Q prompt because, as you can recall, or I can open it again, empty latent image, this gave us the resolution, right? In this case, I mean, I only downloaded a lower resolution version, but it will use the resolution of our input image as the generation image resolution, right? So it will take the resolution of this image and generate a new image on this in the same resolution. And this can be horrible. I mean, not horrible, but this can be quite a big issue in the case, for example, that you take like a 4K resolution image and then you want to generate a 4K resolution output image with AI. This may, I mean, it's not going to destroy your PC, but it might crash it or something like that. So we will not run this. Of course, if you have a reference image that already has the perfect resolution, you can do it like this. Like then you can click Q prompt. But what we want to do is to resize the image first to the resolution that we want to generate, right? So now, if you double click and search for resize, you will see there's nothing in there, right? Nothing to find. So this is a very, very, very important step in learning ComfyUI, because now we need a custom node that resizes the image for us. Honestly, I'm not really sure why they didn't include this into the base of ComfyUI yet, because it's something very basic. But anyway, there is a fix to that, and I will show it to you right now. So let's go back to Stability Matrix, right? Stability Matrix is running in the background the whole time. If you want to go back to, like, let's say you did something in the meantime, just click your way through. In order to get back to the console, you just click on Packages, and then here you will find all the things happening, right? So for one, you can go to the console and stop the ComfyUI, or stop ComfyUI here, or you can also stop it there. So I'm just going to go to the console and click stop it, because now we have to install something in order to get this working again. I think you don't even have to stop it maybe, I don't know. But anyway, I'm just going to stop it. So one way to add this kind of functionality is to manually install an extension that can do that kind of thing. So for one, you can just do your web search if you have something in particular you're looking for. So I can now go onto like Google or DuckDuckGo or whatever search engine you want to use and just search for ComfyUI resize image node, right? In this case, I already know which one can do that, so I can search for it directly. So I know there's a ComfyUI Essentials node, and this is a generally a trusted node. So you can check the GitHub repository for all of these nodes by just clicking here. And you should usually try to check it and see if this is like a commonly used one. Right, so here I can see it has 7 contributors, it has like 580 stars, so this seems very trustworthy, right? So I can see many people are using it, many people are working on it, so there won't be like a virus hidden in it. But we have seen this before in some custom nodes, that people actually, like they made a regular node at first and then kind of started to update it and put like some malicious code in it. And there can also, like, always, like, you never know what kind of people are programming this. Maybe the person just goes crazy one day and just puts like some virus into that. So always kind of keep track that you're not just installing custom nodes that are kind of fishy or stuff like that. Never give them API keys, never give them passwords, never do weird stuff with it, right? In this case, I'm pretty safe about this one. So I'm just going to click on it and now I can click install. So here again, it will tell me the basically the same thing I just told you, like make sure like, no, I'm not responsible for you downloading viruses, right? So do this at your own caution and digression. So this one will just do a bunch of things in the background now and prepare to install it. Honestly, I'm quite surprised that it does all of this right now. Maybe this was introduced in a recent update, because usually I think it only does this kind of thing once you start ComfyUI again. But I guess it already installs it ahead of time now, so maybe it launches faster once we open ComfyUI again. So we'll just have that running and kind of wait for this to be done, basically. I hope it doesn't take too long. If you have any questions, great opportunity to leave something in the chat and I can hopefully respond and clarify things if there are any questions or issues. Oh, right, okay, so this is finished now. Still, take your time. Please feel free to ask any questions in the chat. So now we can go into the extensions tab here again and check the installed extensions. So now we can see ComfyUI Essentials here. And now I can launch ComfyUI again, and this will basically start it. Maybe it will install things further, I'm not sure. I guess no. Okay, so they kind of changed it and the installation is already happening ahead of time. So back in the day it used to be that you just click on install and it will install the next time you start ComfyUI. So maybe it will change again. So now we are back, and if you want to make sure everything is working still, you can just reload the page or you can click on refresh, anything like that. And now we should be able to find a resize node, right? So I'm going to double click again and search for resize, and here we go. It says image resize with or by the Essentials pack. So now we can put it in between the image and the VAE encode, right? So because we want to kind of send the right resolution straight into the VAE encode. So now I'm just going to connect it like this and like that. And I'm just going to cough for a second. I'm sorry, I'm just going to mute myself if I can find it. I hope you didn't hear that. I think you did not. Okay. So, and now we can resize the image like this. So in this case, I'm using SDXL, so I know I have to do the higher resolution, but if you're using Stable Diffusion 1.5, oops, you have to stay with 512 by 512 pixels. Another thing you can do now, just to make sure everything looks correct, is to have this preview image node that was already showing there as suggested. This way, again, it just shows you what happens. It doesn't save it. So in this case, I just want to show how it looks like after that, because in my case, I don't really care about the result or like the if it's stretched or not. So I'm just going to keep it as like method stretched. You can also use a different one here. Theoretically, you can also upscale and use interpolation for that, but now I don't really need that. So I'm just gonna click generate now, but I'll explain later why that doesn't make sense, but I'll do it now just so that you can see what happens. So here you can already see it's like squeezed down now, right? So it's kind of stretched to the lower resolution, but the output image still looks very much like we had it before. And that is for one important reason that I skipped over earlier and that we can get to or have to get to right now. So when we are generating image-to-image generations, we have to take a look at the denoise value. So denoising in this case basically means how much are we using the random noise and how much are we using anything else. So here I'm using a value of 1. So it will basically use 100% of random noise. But in our case, we now want to use partially our input image as a reference and partially random noise. So in this case, I should, for example, if I put it to 0.5, it will use 50% random noise and 50% our input image. So let's just see how that affects it. You can already see it's way too dominant. It's basically creating our image here with an eye, I guess. Let's see how it looks like when it's done. But again, you can already see too much input image, too little random noise. I mean, that's a funny image. I don't mind it, but not really what I had in mind, right? So if I want to have, for example, like in this case, I can already see I need more random noise and less input image as a reference. So in this case, I can go to 0.7, which means 70% random noise, 30% input image. So now I can generate this again. And this already looks very different, right? So now we can already see, like it kind of takes a bit of the composition, I guess, because we have like this kind of boxy thing in the center. But it also covers the face much better because it has like more, I guess, like a fabric kind of color as a reference here. And this is very interesting to my students, if they are watching this now or later. At least you know, because we talked about it in class. This is quite a bad outcome for some reason. And I think every time I do a stream, the images look very bad when I generate them on stream rather than off stream. And even in the class, it looked better than this. So this is not really what I wanted to get to, but at least you get the general gist of it, right? So in this case, I would kind of have to go, I guess, lower to some degree. But now it's kind of like very difficult to find a fitting thing. So the prompt is probably also not great. But stay with me, we will generate nicer images, and as I promised you before, we will still generate the thumbnail image, right? So this is basically the next step that we will take. So if we go further in the presentation, you will see here the part about using custom workflows. So this you can already see, this is basically the image from the thumbnail, and now you can go in here and save this image locally on your device. I already have it saved here, and I'm just gonna overwrite it, so just so that you can see it's safe, I guess. So I'm gonna overwrite it, and now it's gonna download again, right? And this is something you can do with any image theoretically. I will show you in a moment. You have downloaded the image that I gave you, which we created at Heibara Ai. With ComfyUI, and now I can drag and drop this image here from I downloaded it, and I drag and drop it into ComfyUI, and it will give you the entire workflow for how we generated that image. So now I kind of skipped ahead a little bit, but you can already see, if I refresh it, I'm not sure if it shows that again, if I reload the page, you see something is missing here, but generally you can see you can or all the metadata about the workflow is embedded in the images you create in ComfyUI. So this is super amazing. So in this case, take for example, okay, here's like something missing. So maybe I want to go back to a different workflow. So for one, I can always go to like load default, right? and this will load this kind of default workflow. But say, for example, I want to go back to whatever I did when I created this apple. So now I can, in this case, actually, can I? I cannot. But that's a good point as well, so I can check it here, but okay, I cannot drag and drop it from there. But now I can show you where you can find your generated images in your PC, basically, right? So here it doesn't, I cannot just drag and drop it in there. But if I go into my stability matrix folder, right? So I installed it here. I have the stability matrix folder, and here I have the data folder. If you are on macOS devices, the data folder will most likely end up in your applications, like system applications folder, right? So in your applications folder, there should be a new folder data, and there you find all the same things that you will find here on Windows. In Windows, you just have your folder wherever it is and just click on data. Here you find a few different ways to view the images you created. So I guess the most obvious one is to go to the images folder. And actually, no, I don't know what happened here. Okay, usually the images would be here. I'm quite curious what happened here. The other way to do it, and I hope I'm in the correct folder to begin with, is to go to packages, and here you will find all the WebUIs you installed, right? So since I know I generated all my images with ComfyUI and it's the only one here, you can open it here. But for example, if you search, like if you're using a few different WebUIs and you don't want to check like all the images you created from all those, but only the ones you created in ComfyUI, you can go to packages, ComfyUI, and here should be an output folder. So interestingly, here everything is in. So anyway, now here I have all the images, and I can take this one, for example, and drag and drop it in here, and we will get the workflow that we use to create this image, right? So, oops, and this one is a bit wrong anyway. So again, back to the one that you just downloaded that you can find in the slides is this one, right? And now you see this here, the warning missing node types. This gets me to the next most important thing. So ComfyUI really lives from custom nodes, right? You saw like you even need a custom node to resize an image. And there are more interesting ones that you might want to work with. This one you can check, or like whenever you open a project and something is missing, you can see it here. And here you can see it's the image compare node. So actually, I could also just delete this one and run the workflow as it is. But if I want to use that one for some reason, I can now install an extension that helps us adding any missing custom nodes after the fact, right? So again, the thing that we want to do is to install another extension. So I'm doing the same thing I just did with the ComfyUI Essentials. So I'm going to go back to packages. I'm just going to stop it. Again, I'm not sure if you have to do that. I guess maybe, I don't know, better too much than too little. Now I'm going to go to extensions, and now I'm searching for a very particular custom node, which is called the ComfyUI-Manager. So I'm just going to search for manager, and now we should find this one here. This is the ComfyUI-Manager by Dr.Lt.Data. I guess a Star Trek reference for those of you aware, right? Anyway, never mind. So I just want to install this one. So make sure it's the same node by the same person and install this as well. You will need this for like you will need this 90% of the time you use ComfyUI in some way or the other, I would say. So here I'm just going to click on install, and as we had before, I guess it's going to install it right away and not just when we start ComfyUI. So this might take another second, but relatively fast. And now we should find it in the installed extensions. We have the manager and the essentials. So now I should be able to click launch again, and that should basically restart it relatively quickly. This one is installing a bit more in the background, I assume, or at least it gives us a bit more information. So here we can see the GUI at this URL. So I can go back here and press Ctrl+R for reloading, for example. And now it will show this to me again. So something is missing. And now comes the great thing. Now comes the ComfyUI-Manager magic. I can basically close this, and now I should see, and hopefully you will see this as well, you will see the manager icon here. That wasn't there before, in case you didn't pay attention, but this is new. So now we can click on the manager. And this has a few things going on. You don't need much of that. the main things you will need are those two. So for one, if you don't want to use stability matrix, you can just go into this thing here. It has like 1,500 custom nodes. And here I could also search for, essentials. And here you can already see it's installed, but here you could also install custom nodes. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Again, you can also do that in stability matrix. And for installing like single nodes, I usually prefer stability matrix. But this is the main thing here. I'm going to focus it for you. Install missing custom nodes. That is the one that does the magic. So, okay, I don't want to say a number, I guess a 90% maybe of cases this will detect all the missing nodes in your workflow and gives you a list of them. So if there are more than one, you can click this one here and it will select all of the nodes that are not installed yet. And then you can click on install. So that's what I will do now, because here the comparison node is something that is part of this RG3's ComfyUI nodes. And this is a very popular one as well. Like, I guess even more popular than the ComfyUI Essentials one. Now, something to keep in mind. This doesn't have to be an issue, but I like to do it this way. It will tell you that you have to restart ComfyUI and refresh the browser. You could theoretically click on restart here, but I find that this in the past kind of messed up stability matrix slightly, not really badly, but still I like to do it this way. I like to restart it in the terminal here in stability matrix. So I'm just going to click restart here, because otherwise, at least in the past, I didn't do it for a while because I just got used to doing it that way. If you would have pressed this restart icon, the stability matrix would have been confused if it's still running or if it's not running. Again, it's still working. It should still be working either way, but I just like to do it that way. So I'm just going to recommend it to you. Okay, so now we can see again, it's running again, and now it should have installed the missing custom nodes. So in this case, I'm just going to click close, and I'm just going to reload the page with Ctrl+R. And now we can see the red node turned gray. So that's perfect, that's great. This means we have everything installed as it's supposed to be, basically. Okay, now we can look at, keep in mind what we did. I can show it to you again. We took our image here and just drag and drop it in, and then we get the entire workflow. So here you get the prompt, you get the model. Here you have to make sure you're using or have the same model downloaded already, or use a different model with the same settings, for example. And here in this case, and that's the next thing you will find in the slides, I also give you the reference image we used in this case. So this one is as well, this one is from the New York Public Library as well. And it's actually cropped, so it's only this kind of part of it because it worked better for the generation. So this one as well, oops, you can right click and save it. I'm just going to do that again. I already have it downloaded, but just in case. And now I can put that in here. Here you can also see it's the same title of the image. So I'm just going to drag and drop that image, or I can also drag and drop it from down here and put it in here. So this is the reference image we used. Here you can go through all the other settings as well. And here I just kept it at fixed so that you can like literally exactly produce the exact same image as we have. And now you can also spend some time on the prompt. A tip here, and I'm not sure if this is esoteric at the moment. I haven't double checked this. I should have done this ahead of the stream, but maybe you want to check it yourself. In the Stable Diffusion WebUI by Automatic 11.11, you can weight your prompts with these braces. So these braces basically give more weight, more importance to specific terms or specific words of your prompt. So if something is too underrepresented in your image, you can use those braces to kind of give them more value, right? Again, I'm not sure if it works like that exactly in ComfyUI at the moment in this particular version as well. So this might just be for my own mind, but anyway, it does what it does. So here again, I'm just going to click Q prompt, and this should produce exactly the same image I created. And I created, I think even on a different PC, in a different stability matrix and Stable Diffusion version. I mean, in a different like installation, same all settings, same all files, but different installation. And even now I can reproduce this exact image the same way I did in the first time. Here again we can see, okay, we're using like 80% random noise. This is our input reference image. And now we have the comparison node, which I think is also quite fun. So now you can kind of see like how we went from our input image to this new generation. So again, you've seen I messed up like quite a few of the images we did before because somehow on stream I make worse images, but you can see it is possible. Like it's not magic. It works the way it works. So that's that. Now this was a very simple workflow, right? It's basically the same thing we had before. We just added one more custom node for this comparison kind of thing. But in the next step, we can also use more complex kind of workflows. So the next thing I want to show you, because it's something I prepared for my students as well, and I want to share it with you here, and for the students watching this after the fact, you can refer back to this if you want to. This is a workflow where I basically set up a way to create seamless tiles. So this is pretty cool. Like for the students for this class that they are taking, they have to create tiles, like literal tiles, like physical tiles, and they are supposed to create patterns that are repetitive that you can basically repeat endlessly. But of course the same principle is true for any PBR materials, so any like 3D materials that you want to create. So you can also, instead of using it to create these tiles, you can also use it to create any other texture that you want to create, like a grass texture or a wall texture, so a wallpaper, anything basically. So again, here the same principle. I'm just going to right click it and save the image. I'm not going to do that again because it makes the weird Windows sound. But now I can go back here and check my image and just drag and drop my seamless tile image in here. And now you will see more complex workflow, more things to kind of add after the fact. So here you can also see like some kind of I don't know, inconveniences, stupidities, I guess, on my end, because I use different image resize nodes in different workflows, so you could optimize this by using a different resize one. So we're gonna have like 2 different resize extensions installed after this, but there are worse things than that. Should be fine. So here you can see this is a bit more complex. You can also see I added nodes here explaining all the different steps in this workflow. And yes, basically, we also have these groups, something I can show you, so you can move different parts around. And this kind of like organizes this a little bit better. But again, point being, we kind of have to get used to using ComfyUI-Manager. So we will do the same thing we did before. We go to the manager. So I'm going to highlight this again to you, manager. Then we go to install missing custom nodes, because that's what we want to do. And now we can see there are a few more. Here you can also see here, this one is outdated by now. I'm not even sure for what this is used in this workflow. I'm not very sure, but anyway, usually things are working fine. I can install them all together by clicking on this one on the top here. So this will select all the ones, or I can only select a few or all, and then I can click install, and this will kind of prepare everything. And then the same drill we did before. We have to go back to Stability Matrix and restart it there. Okay, this will take a moment. Again, please go into the chat and let me know if you have any questions. And now we can go back to Stability Matrix. So same thing as before, we are in here, and now we can restart it. It says we can restart it, so we restart it in Stability Matrix. So this might take a bit more time, perhaps, because we're installing quite a lot of stuff. Yeah, this will take an extra moment. So again, if you have anything you want to ask in the chat, please just go ahead and I'll try to answer everything to the best of my ability. So this really takes a while, as you can see, but I think we're slowly getting there. Again, something to consider, of course. If you have more custom nodes, more complex ones, they will take longer to install. Especially some of these custom nodes might already automatically download models that go together with those nodes, but we are not using any of those right now. But we will talk a little bit more about like workflows where there are extra custom nodes you may want to or have to install. But anyway, now we got this going again. We see the GUI thing here going on, and now we can minimize this again, close this, and just reload the page. And now everything should be not red. Amazing, perfect. So I'm not going to go through the entire workflow here, but I'm just going to give you some rough ideas. And again, most of this is explained in the notes. And again, you can just download this yourself and use it yourself via the slides. Again, they are in the video description and in the chat. So in this case, I used the Dreamshaper one so that people with lesser hardware can still run this pretty easily. And here we can otherwise also select a different model. The empty latent is not connected to anything because I'm using an image-to-image workflow, but I can also connect it at first here to the latent image and then put it to 512 by 512 because we're using Stable Diffusion 1.5. Then here we have things that make seamless tiles, or like it makes the model be able to create seamless tiles in the generation process, right? So that's a really important and essential part of this. Then here we have the prompts. In this case, I'm just saying aperiodic tiling, sharp edges, clear lines, and vector. And as a negative prompt, I set waves, round lines, and 3D and depth, because those are the kind of things I didn't want to have in there. So since we are not using all this stuff down here because we are kind of like ignoring the whole image-to-image thing and just generate something from an empty latent, we basically skip that and just have the settings here, everything kind of normal. In this case, I have to go to 1 again, obviously, right? We're going back, we're not using a reference image, so we do 100% random noise. And now we can basically just generate this and look kind of like how this turns out. So this one is kind of interesting. I'm not sure why it created this kind of like only partial look. I'm not sure where that is coming from. But here, this is a kind of fun node to play with, like just one of the many cool custom nodes, because this will already tile your output image. So this is the output image and this is the tiled output image. So here you can check if the transitions are really seamless. Oh, okay, and this is a bit more complex, looks pretty nice. And this way we can just endlessly generate like new fully random patterns, I guess. So something we could do as well now is we could say something like stone texture, PBR texture, flat, something like this. And I think that one can stay the same. And maybe we can see if we can actually create a stone texture. So this doesn't look too bad, actually. I mean, it looks a bit strange. I'm just going to go maybe through a few ones. So this would be a brick wall. So you basically just created yourself a brick wall texture for free in Stable Diffusion in ComfyUI. So that's super cool, I think, and maybe especially for those who know my channel from 3JS, maybe you want to create some textures like that. So let's get back to the original one. I'm just gonna drag and drop the original one back in here just for reference. And now I'm going to show you the other part. You can also use a reference image here. Something to consider here as well. Actually, I'm not sure how ComfyUI is handling this. But I know this is the way it is handled in Stable Diffusion WebUI, at least how it used to be handled, is that you can also basically save time by using this image-to-image workflow, because you're basically taking away some of the denoising steps, because you're already starting with an image to begin with, right? So usually a workflow with an image-to-image step is faster compared to one without one, right? Okay, so now I can just go back and maybe I use the same reference image I had before, just for fun. This one should be easy to tile because it already is basically tiled. It doesn't really go beyond the frame at all. So now, yeah, basically I'm putting my image here, I'm resizing it to 512 by 512 pixels. This one I will show you in a moment, but we're basically, this one is bypassed, that's why it is this strange color, so it's not in use. And then I'm putting the latent back in here, and I'm using 55% denoising. So it's 55% reference image and no, 45% reference image and 55% random. So let's just generate something like this. And this is kind of cool already, right? You can see slightly like the pattern is kind of repeated here and the kind of outlines are taken over from there. So let us do this with a different one. So I'm going to go on my other screen. I'm just going to quickly go into the images we generated so far. And we will just use one of the images we generated. So let's just use this one, for example, because this one is much more complicated, or not much more complicated, but a bit more complicated to tile, because obviously something is going out of the frame, so it's not all yeah, I don't know, like you have to make a better effort to tile it, if that makes sense, right? I hope you can kind of follow me here. So just for fun, I'm just going to try that. Here you can see as well, I'm just stretching it. So this one takes a lot from the face, and here you can see like it's not really tiling it here, right? So it's like, I mean, it's creating a line. I guess it is tiled in a sense, like kind of seamless. I mean, it's obviously tiled, but kind of seamless. But a way, if you're working with something, we can also use some of the Apple images, for example. They will be even more so complicated, right? So here you can really see the edges kind of like here. So if you want to avoid that, one way that I put into this workflow that you can use, and a fun thing to learn, is to use something that blends the image, basically. So this is bypassed right now, right? So it's not in use. So the way you can unbypass it or bypass any other node in the future is to right click and click on, where is it? Bypass, right? So now it gets the regular color again. You can also use the Ctrl+B shortkey. So with Ctrl+B you can bypass it and unbypass it. So in this case I'm saying, telling it to blend them by 20% and tie them in 2 tiles. So you will see what happens once we run this, right? So now it already kind of blends them, so it makes it easier to tile them later, right? So now the tiling should look a bit more natural in a sense, right? So this, of course, is not what you want to do always, but sometimes it might be helpful. So in this case, for example, if I want to go back to like a different reference image, one that's easier to tile, let's take this one, for example. There's no reason to blend it ahead of time, right? Because it's already kind of tiled. So in this case, I would just bypass it and then just generate it again. And then we get this one, which looks more fun in this case. Actually, this one's kind of strange because it also creates these outlines. But anyway, I think you get the point, right? And if you have further questions about this or kind of are more interested in the details, you can go through all of these settings here or the nodes here and kind of check the different options and settings. So this one was kind of easy to work with because we can use this with any checkpoint model. But there's one last thing I want to show you, and I'll kind of try to keep that short. So if you have any questions, leave them in the chat right now because we're slowly approaching the end of the stream. A very long stream, I'm sorry. But the last thing I want to show you is image to video workflow. I don't know why it was already scrolled down here, but this is a particular case because we will need a very specific model or checkpoint model to use this. So recall earlier, the other workflow worked with any checkpoint model. You can just put any in and all the other things should work. But this one is more particular because you cannot run it unless you have a specific model. So this is from our blog at Heibara Ai. So you can just open it here. That might be a bit more intuitive in this case. And just go through this. So again, like this, I can recommend to you easily because I wrote the article, right? So this is basically all safe. This will give us a few more nice and interesting details that we can look at. So this basically, you can already see it here, takes an input image and then generates a video from it. So this might be interesting for some of you already to begin with. Now, there's a second way to download or use ComfyUI workflows. So in this case, if I click on download, it asks me to download a JSON file. This is totally fine. So JSON generally is more of a data storage type of file, so it's not supposed to execute something, right? So if you're downloading this, it's not like an executable file that will like give you a virus. So I think JSON files are generally safe unless you use them in a kind of strange context. Maybe there's some information in there that will then do something else. But anyway, for this, we're pretty safe. This is just text, basically. So I'm giving you the Windows sound again, just to prove to you that this is safe. And now we can go to ComfyUI and put this JSON file in here. It's basically the same thing that happens that we use when we put our PNG in it. It just has all the kind of metadata to give you all the things to do the workflow, right? So in this case, we can see again, right, there's some more stuff missing. So for third time is a charm? I don't know. I guess, is it? I don't know. Okay, so again, you first go to the Manager tab. Oops. Okay, that doesn't work, right? Manager tab. Then you go to install missing custom nodes. So in this case, we have 2 more. I'm just going to click this. I'm going to click install, and that will install all the custom nodes. So I will wait at least until we restart again, because that will take some time. And then I will go back to the blog post to give you like the extra information. Again, here you can see these are pretty common and safe. So now, as I did before, I'm going to open the stability matrix thing again and just click restart here, and that will start to install everything, right? So let's get back to the tutorial. So for one, if you're interested in this, I just recommend you to just basically read the entire article. So here it explains a lot of things, and it will also tell you to download the SVD model, right? So as I told you before, this one needs a particular model. I'm just going to read it. The core of SVD is the respective model. There are several options to download the current SVD model, XT 1.1. We can either manually download the model from the official model page on Hugging Face, which requires a Hugging Face account, or use other sources. There are also other sources. Oops, yeah, I guess repetitive. There are also other sources for the model. For example, a version is available on Civet AI. Recall, Civet AI was the thing that we were using in Stability Matrix, so we can at least search for that in our model browser, but sometimes it might be that you can really not find it. In this case, I'm actually not sure. Okay, you have SVD as a filter here, so let's check that. And I'm not 100% certain if this is the correct one, actually. If we download it, no, I think that's actually the wrong one. So let's go again to all and check for SVD. Maybe this way we can find it. Because I haven't installed it like this for a while. We can also download it manually, and I can show you how that works. Here we have the correct one, so the first one. So in case you want to do it like this, check for SVD, and the one we want is this image to video XT 1.1. Recall, XT 1.1 was the one I mentioned in the post. So I can click on import, and this way it should be downloaded correctly right away. And here we can see. And this way we should be able to use it in the workflow in just a moment. This one takes a while to download, so I'm not sure if we will go through the whole thing, but again, so we already had this, right? It installed it, we can see it again, right? See the GUI, means everything is installed. Now we can reload the page, and the red ones should turn something else than red. You also already know by now the purple ones means they are bypassed. So if I want to unbypass them, Ctrl+B as a short key, or right click and click on bypass. In this case, it has a good reason to be bypassed, so I'm not going to unbypass that. But here, and that is the thing that will be relevant to you, when you input or when you put the workflow into ComfyUI, it will already show you the name of the model that, or the name of the file here as well, that the original workflow was executed with. Even, and that's important, even if you do not have that model or if you do not have that file, right? So if I would click on this now, it will show me 2 different models, none of which are or is the one that we see here. So sometimes you accidentally click this and then you're like, oh shit, sorry for the explicit language, damn it. what was the name of the original model that I was supposed to use? In that case, just go back to the original workflow. So I can do that here quickly, or one folder further up, and just put that in here again, and it will show you again the one that it was originally generated with. So let's see if this is reasonable. Okay, we're at 30%. Let's just have it running. I think we can download it fully. Again, one last big opportunity for you to ask any questions and let me answer, ideally. And we'll just have this download and then kind of go through the image to video generation just once, right? Okay, so feel free to ask any questions in the chat. Another thing to consider, just generally, that I would like to mention, using this workflow now, this is one of those workflows that will not work on any device, right? So if you followed along so far and things work just fine, that's great. And maybe you can use Stable Diffusion 1.5 on your device, whatever it is, and that's fine. Just stay with that and kind of work with the limitations you have. You will only be able to reasonably generate 512 by 512 images, but you can still upscale them and stuff like that. Something we can look at in the future as well, the whole upscaling process. But this is one of the models where just some devices will not be able to make it work. So again, talking about like my teaching, we had one person last semester who had an M1 MacBook, if I recall correctly, and I don't know how much RAM. I think it was more than 8 GB of RAM, but it was like kind of like an early adopter Apple Silicon device, right? So maybe 8 GB of RAM and an M1 chip. And that one just couldn't run the Stable Video Diffusion workflow at all. Like, it just said like, okay, I'm not meeting the requirements. So that might be your case as well, and I wouldn't tell you that you have to get like a new PC right away, but that might be a way where you, or a situation where you may run into the limitations of your hardware. And again, that's totally fine. One thing you can do while this is downloading that I can show you, if you really don't have the hardware, you can check something like RunComfy, RunComfyUI, RunComfy.com. This is, for example, a service where you can use a cloud GPU that basically generates the images for you, and you're basically running ComfyUI on this cloud device. I used this briefly. Okay, so I think it's still great that you have the opportunity to do that. I wouldn't put any personal data there just to make sure, right? I wouldn't upload like images of my own face or something in an image-to-image workflow there, because why would I want to take that risk? But generally, I think it's great because it gives people the opportunity to run ComfyUI even if they don't have the necessary hardware. At the same time, when I used it, it was not super reliable, and you pay by time. So you pay even if you're not generating anything, but just like trying to figure your workflow out. So that's not great, but at least I think you get 30 minutes of free trial, and after that you pay per hour. So for like a decent machine, you pay like $1 per hour. So you can just try the free version or like the free thing for like 30 minutes and see if that's something for you, if you're running into issues with your hardware, just in terms of hardware requirements. So let's check. I think we should be relatively close to the end. Again, if you have any questions, let me know in the chat, and we will soon be able to run this workflow. And for that one, it will get loud. This is quite a demanding workflow, so yes, it will get quite loud, but something to worry about it when we are there. So we are very close to it to finish. Something I can tell you already is that you don't have to restart ComfyUI when you just download a new model, right? So we just wait for this to download, and we've seen this before, but just to talk about it again, it will soon be done. So Okay, I'm not sure what's downloading here. Okay, I think it's probably like the preview image. Okay, we're having a comment, and I'm just gonna use the text-to-speech again. Let's see if that works. So
HQYG says, a small tip, if you use the workflow for tiled images and also use a reference image, it's helpful to crop the edges that are not relevant, for example the frame.
Perfect, yeah, good. Good point. So you can already prepare the images ahead of time. And please let me know in the chat if this text-to-speech is like very awkward or something like that. I mean, the quality is not great, but anyway, I think it works. I don't know. Okay, let me know in the chat. So on the comments after this video has gone or is available as a VOD. Now it should be downloaded. Great, so we can clear finished, so we see that everything is done. Again, I don't have to restart ComfyUI. I can just go back here. Now if I would click on it, you wouldn't see it yet because we first have to refresh it. So I'm just going to click on refresh. Node definitions updated. So now we can find the name of the model that we want to use in the drop-down menu thing, right? Okay, so we see the exact same name that we had in the reference. So in my case, what will I do? We can just put one of our generated images in there. Let's just put this one in there. It will be cropped. I'm not sure if this will work very well, but generally, oh, there's another nice thing to talk about, but generally we could already click on QPrompt and you can read the notes to kind of get more insight about this. One thing that is kind of helpful to understand, to know, is that you can automatically create subfolders, right? So in this case, I can say animation or animation, yeah, right? And then if I put a slash there and then say frame, it will create a new folder called animation, and inside of the folder animation it will create images that have the name frame, like ... Right, so this way we can create subfolders, especially for this where we have like images that are in a mutual context. It makes a lot of sense, but also if you want to like work on a particular project, you can just call it like, I don't know, video project or something like that. I think you can also do subfolders of subfolders. I don't know. Yeah, and then you can create another subfolder and then create an image there. Anyway, so let's just call it animation, and just frame, something like that. Or just use the one that we had before. So number them through. Okay, now we got that, we got the image. This will be cropped, and we can just press Q prompt, and we should be able to see what's happening here. Again, this will be very loud in the background. You don't really have to understand all the settings here, but we will hopefully see in a few seconds now that this is kind of creating a video for us. So again, if you have any questions, just let me know in the chat. And once this is kind of wrapped up, you can go back to the slides and kind of follow everything, get all the workflows from the images, and yeah, just reproduce all the things we did. So this will take like maybe 3 minutes or so, maybe a bit longer, while having the stream running. Okay. Okay, so we're making progress, almost there already. So you can already see the preview kind of a thing, again the noisy version of it, and based on this image the video will be created. It is limited, this particular workflow is limited to 25 frames, so it's very short, but you can use this film interpolation thing here that is bypassed here to kind of extend it and give your animation extra frames, which basically makes it a bit slower, but still quite nice, I think. So again, just read the entire thing here if you want to follow it more closely. but now we should get something, right? And this is one of the better ones, actually. I mean, it's not perfect, like now we would have to go back to tweaking all the things. Here, this one doesn't save it automatically, so you can save actually, can you save it? Save the preview, right? And now you can save it as an MP4 file, which actually here is quite fun because the MP4 file also has the metadata embedded. I think it wasn't always like that. I think you also have to turn it on here. Yeah, save. No, wait. Yeah, save metadata should be inside of here. But just to wrap things up, we should now find in our output folder, right? We see all the images we created. And one of this is, or like inside of here, we also find the folder we just created. And here we find all the frames of the animation. So now we can also use FFmpeg, for example, or like another tool, doesn't really matter. We can do this in Premiere, stitching or putting the frames together into an animation, right? So that's basically how to do that. So to wrap things up and to kind of recap what we did so far, I will just quickly basically go through our slides. So, oops, I'm not sure why that is not loading, right? We started basically with this image, kind of what we wanted to create, and hopefully you were able to create this by now. Then we talked about who this is for, what you need, right? Double check and just try, right? Doesn't cost anything to try. All the tools we're using are free anyway. We basically installed Stability Matrix. We learned how to use it, how to use the interface, how to install ComfyUI, how to use ComfyUI, and how to generate the image from the thumbnail. We installed it. Then we learned how to use JoyCaption to get from a visual reference to a prompt that we can use, and maybe gives us some more stuff to work with rather than just coming up with everything ourselves. And then we also learned how to get started with using AI to generate prompts, basically a chatbot where we can kind of go back and forth and kind of try to improve the results that way. Also how to create a bat file and to run it not automatically, but run the AI with a basic double click. We learned how to do image-to-image generation, how to install custom nodes manually, how to install the ComfyUI-Manager and install custom nodes automatically, basically. We learned how to do the seamless tile generator, which was a workflow that we can use basically with any checkpoint model. But we also learned, just briefly, how to create use a workflow that requires a very specific model. So in this case, the video generation model. So if you followed along, you're now able to create, I hope, pretty nice images. You are able to create seamless tiles and textures, which is very nice, I think, as well. You know how to generally generate stuff, how to do image-to-image generation, how to install new custom nodes, how to use workflows, and even how to create videos based on single images. So I hope this is already quite a bit. I mean, this went on quite long now, right? 2.5 hours. But I hope this is basically your whole introduction. I think you can follow along this whole thing. Maybe you do it in parts, maybe you go back to it, maybe you want to look at this in like 3 months from now and just check it again. But I hope you were able to do something fun with this. And with that, I'm going back to the start and say thank you for you tuning in, and hope you had a good time. And if you have any questions after the fact, just let me know in the YouTube comments, and I hope to see you again soon. Goodbye.